Are you recording this?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay, so everything you say can and will be used against you.
Oh, no.
So, okay, hey, let's get moving on property tax. This is kind of fun stuff. And here's the thing about property taxes. Few agents know anything about it. I mean, that's the truth. But there are 4 names that really regulate property taxes in California. Anyone have any idea what they might be?
4 names.
Yeah, names. 4 names.
Jarvis
These are common
Gann.
names. Jarvis Gann, 2.
Oh, Mello-Roos.
Mello-Roos, bingo. Okay, so Jarvis Gann and Paul Gann were California conservative activists. Okay, we're going to talk about that a little bit. Mello-Roos was actually a Mello and a Roos. They were both assemblymen in California. Okay, so when you hear Mello-Roos, those are last names of people, as was Jarvis Gann. So anyway, when you talk about that, those are 4 names you really need to know about.
How do you spell oh, never mind.
So, yeah, so, okay, so Prop 13, let's go back. Our whole tax structure right now is based upon Prop 13. It was approved by voters in 1978, and it was affirmed by the Supreme Court. It's been tested all the way to the top, and it's going to work. It sets property values at their 1976 assessment, or whenever they're purchased if it was after that. Now, most homes are purchased now after 1976, so your assessment is actually set based upon generally your sales price. There are some exceptions, but generally your sales price. And then the property cannot go up in tax more than 2% a year. So, which is kind of be thought to be kind of like lower inflationary numbers, which is great. Now, here's the other thing. It takes 2/3 of the voters to change this. And it's hard to get 2/3 of the voters in a state to change anything. So when this was passed and approved by the Supreme Court, confirmed by, it made this really a good thing for the tax people. Because let me tell you how it used to work, and you'll see how stupid this really is. Not stupid, unfair. Every department in California or in the county, they would all put in how much they wanted to run their department next year. How much they wanted. Oh, if it takes this much, that's what we need. If they could really do it with 40 million, but it'd be nice to have 80 million, they asked for 80 million. Didn't matter, they just asked for their dream amount. Then what they did is they added up all the total assessments of all the properties, and they would go up quite a bit, and they would divide the number they needed by that tax rate, and that's what you paid. Now, what that meant was we can spend any way we want, and we're going to put together our departments the way we want to, and you taxpayer will have to pay it based on your property taxes. So, the property taxes were about 2 to 2.2%.
Wow.
More than double what they are right now. Had that been going on, can you imagine what some people would be paying right now? It would be exorbitant. So anyway, Prop 13 was a key revolt. It was really fought pretty hard because the police departments, fire departments, every government agency stood up and said, we will shut down. And I was here, I was living this as some of you others were. I mean, I'm not even sure that the parks had to cut their grass every 2 weeks instead of every week. I noticed nothing as far as difference, other than they didn't have probably as much government waste as what they had before. Now, you might hear my little political thing in this, but it was garbage, and to have to pay that much in property taxes, especially as property taxes assessments were going up so strongly. So that's about our best tax in California. Our sales tax is high. Our income tax is the second highest. Always goes back between New York and us as who's highest. So we have a lot of high taxes, but this is the one we kept pretty good, which is good for the housing industry. Okay, so let's talk about Mello-Roos. So if you look on a tax bill, how can you tell if there's Mello-Roos? What's the magic initials you see?
I just know the amount is larger. I don't know about magic initials.
Okay, so the magic initials are CFD. That means Community Facilities District. If you see a CFD, it may not say Mello-Roos. It'll probably say CFD. CFD means Community Service District.
Wait,
Facility.
CSD?
CF, as in Community
Facility.
Facilities District, yeah.
Facilities district,
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
So, now, what happened with this, and the reason this came in like in 1986 was there wanted to be new construction in certain areas. And the property taxes probably did not have enough to pay for new infrastructure. Even though they might get the taxes down the road back, they don't have enough for the infrastructure. So they make anyone who owned land or wanted to develop that land have to vote in what's known as a CFD bond or a Mello-Roos. That would then give them extra taxes to pay for that infrastructure to get the community up and going, okay? So it was, I think, a pretty smart thing. I mean, could they have done it with the original taxes? I don't know, but this has seemed to work out. And the Mello-Roos is a tax that has a deadline on it. It does have a maturity date. Some of them are 20 years, some are 30 years. So we always have to look at that and see what they are when they buy a home. That comes out, when we get the zone disclosures, you usually get some specific information
I
on that.
found some that were 40, I think, even in Irvine.
Yeah, they can be,
Crazy.
and there are some with 30 with options to, and then there was also one that was fairly recent, like 4 or 5 years ago, that they literally had enough that they quit it early.
Oh,
That was
wow,
really
that's
cool
nice.
too.
That's
So
awesome.
depending on
You
these
never
districts
heard
and
that.
how good they are, and how committed they are to being, pretty efficient, they can be good. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, how that affects homes, because you hear a lot of buyers saying, I don't want to pay Mello-Roos, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's kind of get more into how to figure property taxes. Now, I'm going to show you 2 ways to figure property taxes today. One is you can figure them yourself, okay, and you don't need anyone else. And then I'm going to show you another way that can be kind of a shortcut that can be very helpful too. So the basic property tax formula in California is pretty simple. It's 1%, and that's known as, what's that known as? Basic, yeah, levy. Good, you win. Basic levy, so 1% is the basic levy. And then you're gonna have 2 things on top of that. You're gonna have potential things on top of that. You may not have those. You may have some bonds that were passed previous to 1978 that are carrying forward. In most cases, those are very small, like where Steve and I live, the bonds are, down to like less than $100 a year, I think, total bonds. Which means our tax is like 1% a year plus less than $100 probably. So, which is not very much, right? It's basically 1%. By the time you get a tax credit of $70, it about zeroes out to 1%. So 1% can't go up more than 2% a year. But then when you have the CFD or Mello-Roos, that's added onto that. And that's where sometimes it gets a little tricky of what you're going to, what the property tax is going to be. Because if there's only a basic levy and you never had to figure out what the CFD bonds were or previous bonds to 78, all you have to do is say, if you buy a property for $1 million, it's 1%, it's $10,000 a year, and it can't go up more than 2% a year, okay?
Just so everybody knows, the tax bills are public.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go to octaxcollector.gov and you can look up a property tax bill on the property that you're listing
Absolutely.
or buying, and it lists it out. Like I was just looking at one in Aliso Viejo because the thank goodness the Mello-Roos are paid, but they do have a metro water rate of 0.0035.
Which is how much now? They tell you it's very, very low.
The rate is 0.0035, so it's based on the value of the home.
Right,
So in a $900,000 home, it was $32.
right.
So it's minimal, but it will list out all these other, and then you have like vector control and molten water and some other fees.
But they're all tiny in
They're
most
small.
cases. It's
They're
the
really
Mello-Roos, the CFDs, it's gonna be bigger.
Yes.
However, by the way, as far as finding tax bills, you can find them on the OC app. That's the easiest way. Not only can you find property tax, you can find what anyone owes on a house. You can't always know what the current balance is, but every deed of trust recorded against the property can be shown. When I go to do swing loans on property, I just funded Ruthie's a couple days ago at $500,000. I had to go on there and verify what that note was on there. Now, I also asked for proof of current balance, but it showed me what the current balance on their loan was. Now, you then have to, if it's a 10-year loan, it's amortized out some, but it's going to be less than that, not more than that. Okay, so You'd be surprised. In fact, when I would share property profiles, when I used to do listing presentations, you guys probably find out the same thing. A lot of times people will be very surprised how much information you know about them. And they think you have some secret, end to getting all this information. They don't know how much information is public. So, okay, so
Sorry,
Yeah.
real quick. So Mello-Roos is the same as CFD, correct?
CFD. Yes.
Equals the same thing.
Yeah, same thing. One designates the other, yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, so let's talk about, this first of all is a tax bill, okay? And it's pretty easy to know, to kind of look at that. And you see the basic levy up there is 1%, always 1%.
I'm sorry, where are you looking at that?
On the very top, you see the basic levy up there,
Oh.
basic levy 1%. And you can see these other things on here.
First line. Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking too high. Yes, I see it, thank you, sir.
And you'll see where it says CFD, that's where it's usually
Yep,
on there.
Saddleback Valley.
And so look at this, CFD is gonna be a big one. All the other ones are probably bonds that were there previous, okay? So that gives you an idea of a tax bill. You can tell quite a bit from that. But what we wanna know when we're working with a buyer is we wanna know what their future tax is gonna be. So I'm gonna show you how to kind of longhand that out. So let's take this. Let's say you have a sale price of a home which is $1 million. In most cases, it'll be reassessed at $1 million. Okay, so you know that 10,000 is a starting point. Okay, so then you have to add in either a school bond, a water bond, or Mello-Roos. Okay, and once you add those in, then you can see what it should be next year. Now, because the Mello-Roos and bonds like that do have, some of them have potential for increases. The increase is usually 2 or 5%. Is the most common you see. They could be slightly more than next year, but it's not going to throw you off that far. Remember, you're trying to estimate, okay, what the taxes will be. So if you were to estimate the annual taxes on $1 million for this property, it'd be $10,732. Divide by 12, you get your monthly. Because everybody wants to know what their PITIA is. Everybody knows what PITIA is. Principal, interest, tax, insurance, and association. That's what people want to know. Sometimes you take the insurance out because it's paid annually, but that gives you an idea of what your monthly, kind of responsibility is on something. Okay, next thing. So when are taxes due? Okay, anyone know without looking?
I like the
April and
abbreviation.
November, aren't they?
Yeah, so they're due November 1st, but they're not delinquent until December 10th. That's
Yeah.
the first. The second installment is due February 1st. But it's not due until April 10th. Now, these don't make a lot of sense. So don't try to remember that, your one is 30 days after the, it doesn't make any sense. They're kind of screwy times. But the best way to remember this is what I call no darn fooling around. Okay, no darn fooling around. That means N, November, D, December, fooling, F, February, around April 10th. So once you get the no
I like
darn
that one.
fooling
I
around,
do
then you get this.
Something's
Okay.
wrong with my phone.
So anyway, again, no darn fooling around. That is going to be your acronym that you need for that. Mace, come on in, bud. So, and once you figure out that, you know a lot. If you know the Mello-Roos, you know the tax structure, you know the basic levy, you're on your way to understanding taxes. And you need to know this because the key thing to getting future business is being smart on the current business you have, or being smart when people have to be in contact with you. So, okay, couple things that I'm going to pass out to you here. First of all, this is a property tax timeline. Why don't you pass these out? What do you happen to have here? Pass these out both ways. I don't know if there's enough for today. These are property tax timelines. So property taxes are assessed on the value of the property as of this timeline. And by the way, you guys need to know that property taxes are done in a fiscal year. So, when you get this timeline is based upon a fiscal year. So usually July 1st is the start of the fiscal year. So our fiscal year that we're in currently right now rolls back to last July 1st. And it will extend through June 30th. And then July 1st is the start of that. August, property owners receive what's known as a notice of assessed value. And if they want to, there's a period there within a few weeks that they can, if they want to contest that, they can. And by contesting that, they would then go to the assessor. If the assessor doesn't agree with their assessment, then they can actually go through an appeal process. And I've gone through that process on 2 different occasions, so I know how that works pretty well.
Did you win?
I won in both cases, yeah.
Wow. Okay,
So,
cool.
but understand, one was a long time ago on a property I bought that was on a golf course. It was bought on an auction, and so they tried to make the case that the price you got was unjustified. But I had other comps that showed that it wasn't that far off from what they were, and so they adjusted back to the price. I purchased that. And another one is a very interesting case that some clients of ours a few years ago had, and these were Howard and Sharon Compton. They bought a house out in Codo, and they bought it on a short sale. Got a really good price. House was pretty beat up, but they got a great price on it. And so when it closed, the assessor said, no way. They went through the appeal process, they lost the appeal process. So after that, they called me and they said, I lost this original appeal. I said, let's appeal it at the rest. And then I put together a whole case for them. And the case was basically that the home was on the market for 180 days. It did not sell at a price close to what they bought it at. Okay, so other properties sold around it for much more, and yet this property didn't. And so when we took the panel, we got it assessed to exactly what they paid at. And that saved them about
Nice.
$4,000 a year.
Nice,
Why
very nice,
wouldn't
forever,
the
yeah,
county
nice.
always look at the contract, purchase contract?
Because what they do is, I had a client who was an assessor years ago, and he said, what they do is when they get the sale price, they look on their, what used to be a microfiche screen, now it's computerization. They go on there and say, is that in the area of what homes are selling there? And if they are, then what they're gonna do is, that's what they're gonna do. If it's not, they're gonna send somebody out, a field investigator, to look at that. When the field investigator went out, he saw the property after they had put in $300,000, $400,000 into it. So just from the outside, you can see quite a bit, right? And you can do, right now, you can actually, go up and look at the Google view and stuff like that. I don't know if they use that, but that's what they did. But we won. So again, the assessor won't always be fair, but when you go to the beyond the assessor to the appeals court, it's a lot easier. And it's not a court, by the way. It's just a place at the civic center to where you go in a room and you sit down, and it's very casual. So then you get and then in October you get your tax bill, and your tax bill will then be due November 1st. So when a client asks you, when's your first tax due? It's due December 1st. But you have all the way up to December 10th to pay it without a penalty. But if you don't pay it, what's your penalty? 10%, pretty heavy.
Oh, is it?
10%, pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So you wanna make sure that you meet those tax lines. By the way, all the documents that I'm handing out today are all being sent out to you later, so you can save them, put them on your computer.
Okay, cool.
I'm just using this for illustration. So, okay, no darn fooling around. Okay, let's talk about supplemental taxes, probably the most misunderstood thing there is. So a supplemental tax is simply the difference between the seller's value of what the original tax was assessed at and when the new buyer bought. Okay, so the county wants to make sure they can squeeze every penny they can out of you, right? I guess that's not unfair. So anytime you buy a home after January 1st, let's say you buy a house that is July 1st. That means that your next year's tax assessment bill you're going to get, a whole year's tax bill, is going to be based upon the previous owner's assessment. But you bought it at a higher value, and therefore you're underpaying in taxes. And so your sellers or your buyers might be really excited that they're going to pay, this lower tax bill, right? But the point of this is they're going to get hit with a supplemental tax, and sometimes they're pretty hefty. They can be thousands of dollars. And so if they're not expecting this, guess who gets the first phone call and they're not very happy with who?
Uh-huh.
You.
Us, yeah.
So you need to make sure that they know about this. And how many buyers out there, closed escrows, ever explained about supplemental taxes? It's very close to zero, okay? Only the people on our team will tell them. No other people probably tell them, okay? And what does escrow do? Escrow's not responsible for telling about taxes. They close the escrow. So what do they find out? If they don't know what supplemental tax is, they get a real nice education later, and it's gonna cost them usually a lot of money. Okay, so what we do is we have a thing that's very helpful. First of all, I'm gonna send out this right here, which is gonna be, what are supplemental property taxes? Every one of your buyers should get this in their closing, in their walkthrough package, okay? So they know what supplemental taxes are. But then, we go further, because we're so cool, okay?
And he's talking final walkthrough.
Yeah, final walkthrough.
Yeah, I have not given them that, whatever that is, that,
Yeah, put this in your final
You
walkthrough.
explained it to them, right?
yeah, but I don't
explained
have a document.
There you go.
And I also explained to them that they get a bunch of junk mail in the mail where people are trying to get them to buy things and always send me a
For
picture.
title.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the most common thing you're gonna get after they close?
Title.
Homestead. They're gonna be asked to homestead.
Is gonna be what, sorry?
They're gonna be asked to homestead. They do not want a homestead. The only time you would ever homestead is if you're being sued, and you can do that on the way to court on the judgment day.
Do not
So,
homestead.
so unless they're being sued and the attorney says you wanna homestead your house, you don't do it. So, not very many people has ever needed a homestead. I've never known any person
What does
that's needed a
homestead mean?
Homestead is protect a little bit of your value in the event of a lawsuit,
Oh.
so.
Where's that other document? You had this one and something else?
Well, this one right here, I just sent out to you. I'm not gonna go over it right now. So it's on, I'm gonna send it in the email.
Oh, you're gonna send us a link, okay.
So, but the important dates, you guys got this important dates thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, no buyer should close escrow without you filling this out. Now, the first couple that you do, I recommend you come to me and I help you, show you how you figure this out. But your buyer should get this. Now, why should they get it? I don't know why, because nobody else in the world is gonna get this other than your buyers. But this is gonna tell them when payments are due. Okay, it's gonna tell them when their first, mortgage payment is due. It's gonna tell them when if they have a second, when their homeowners association is due, and taxes. So let me ask you a couple of questions, just so you know this. There are two kinds of payments that you make, or, one would be in the forwards, and one is in the rears, okay? One, arrears, like, for instance, what is a utility bill? Forwards or rears? Right. In other words, you accumulate the debt of the utility, then they bill you for it, and you pay it in the rears, okay? Now, what is property tax?
One of each.
Huh?
One of each.
Yeah, so property tax can be either, because depending on you pay it, if you pay your property taxes on time, okay, the first payment you make in December part rotates back to July 1st, and so it's both in the rears portionally and in the forwards portionally, and then the same thing, when you do your next tax payment, it's done completely in the forwards. So in other words, 3/4 of your taxes is actually paid in the rears, but 1/4 roughly is paid in the forwards. Okay, so you don't need to know that. I mean, it's good to know that. You don't need to know exactly how much, but our property tax is pretty confusing. It could be made so much simpler. But this important. So how about association dues? Are they paid in the forwards and the rears? Forward.
Well, when you're doing your escrow, that's why they have to come up with a lot of money for closing costs sometimes, because you gotta pay all those taxes in forward, the arrears, but
You have to bring it up
to date, but they gotta
close
maybe
us,
have
but-
like 6 months or whatever to pay it. That's
So
why
let's
it's a shocker sometimes.
Let's say you close an escrow today on a home. Okay, when will your next mortgage payment be due? Today is the 15th of January.
March 1st.
Huh?
March 1st.
March 1st. So here's what's gonna happen on a closing statement. They're gonna say, we're gonna make you pay the next 2 weeks up front of interest. Okay, so you'll be paid through escrow. In other words, what Ruth was talking about, you gotta bring extra money. That has to be paid through escrow. Now you're paid up to February 1st. Then, from there on, you pay a month in the rears. Okay, so once it's accumulated through February, you pay March 1st. So if you close today, your first payment's gonna be March 1st. However, that's on your mortgage. On your association dues, you have to take a look at that closing statement to see what escrow took out, because you can't automatically calculate it by just knowing the date you close. Okay, you have to know when they paid. Because if it's very close, like most escrows, if it's the 25th of the month or after, they're gonna prepay it for you. Some of them might have the 15th. They all have their own system to when they're gonna make you pay it. But you don't know what that is but you look at a closing statement, you can't. So once you have some buyers on this, for the first couple, come to me, or, come to Amy and ask us to help you out on this sheet, okay? Now, one of the extra things I put on this, remember, you should give them this as well, but I also have, a little information on here on what supplementary taxes are, okay? What supplemental taxes are.
Is that on this one?
Pardon?
That's on this one?
That's on this one. On this one right here,
Website.
there's
Dates,
information about the
website.
Oh, the
supplemental
website,
taxes.
oh, it's on the back.
So
Oh,
we're gonna
okay.
cover it, and then we're gonna give them a handout on it. We're gonna cover them, we're gonna give them another handout on it, okay? So, and here's the thing, this is the kind of stuff that makes you an agent above and beyond what they've ever had before, because nobody else does this, honestly. They just don't. Okay,
It's like, I have a client right now that she's paying her property tax based on a value of 94,000. And it's gonna sell for over $1 million. So
so,
that's gonna be a huge
huge supplemental tax. Now, the tax payments, the actual tax payment is gonna be tiny, but you need to prepare them.
for the supplemental.
And that's why it's really good to, at some point with your buyers, go over what their PITIA is gonna be. So, and even, let's say their tax bill, for instance, is gonna be like $11,000 a year. Let's say $12,000, $1,000 a month. And right now they're paying $100 a month. Well, you can tell them that this is your payment from the time you close escrow. It's gonna be $1,000 a month on your taxes. The fact that your tax bill is only gonna show 100, don't worry, they're gonna ask you to make it up. They come later, but they don't forget. Now, interesting point, 2009 through 8, 9, and 10, when values went down, actually sometimes supplemental taxes, they'd actually get a check back. Now, I'm sure when they set this up originally, the government never thought they'd have to do that, but they actually had to send out some checks during that time.
How long do people pay supplemental tax?
They just pay it, they'll pay it one
One
time. It's a one-time catch-up fee.
Like, so in Donna's situation?
And that's because, remember, properties are assessed January 1st. The earlier you buy in the year, the higher your tax is gonna be based upon your tax bill. If you happen to buy December 31st, you're not gonna have any supplemental taxes,
Nice.
okay, or December 1st. Right now, your supplemental tax would be less than it would be, it's gonna be more than it would be if you bought later in the year.
And
So-
so can you do an example, for example, so like how she's saying her client bought the house, let's round it up to 100,000, and it'll sell for $1 million, so what's the supplement tax?
So the supplemental taxes, let's say for a year,
About
she got
$4,500.
$11,000, and if she bought it in January, and it's $1,000, it would be a $10,000 supplemental tax bill.
But it's paid
If she
twice.
bought it
Say
in
that
the,
again?
if she
It's
bought
paid
it,
twice.
Can you do it slower? I'm trying to really understand it, I don't get that part.
So Kasha, wait a second. She said 90,000, 100,000
Yeah.
was property tax.
No,
That's
that's
the
how much she bought it
baseline,
for.
that's the
Yeah.
baseline.
Of my current,
At the
Yeah.
owner
When they
is
bought
the
it.
owner.
Yeah,
that, which is my
So-
client is the owner.
So they didn't buy it at that, that's the baseline
that's what they
tax.
bought it for, I thought.
no, they bought it for $1 million.
No.
The new buyer's buying it for $1 million,
The new buyer.
is buying it for $1 million.
Yeah.
So the
So
new
then
buyer's
what
gonna
was it
pay,
before?
for round numbers, the new buyer's gonna pay 12,000, and they pay 1,000.
We never know
Correct.
what they bought it for, cause they could have owned it for 30 years, they might have bought it for 67 or 70, but it goes up every year. Right now, when they're selling it, their property tax base is based off of $90,000. That doesn't mean they bought the house for $90,000.
Then how is it based off of
Yeah.
90 then?
Because
Because
that's
it
what
can
they
go
bought.
up
Well, it's
every
not
year.
90 plus
Oh.
2% plus 2%
Gotcha,
compounded.
gotcha.
January
Yeah.
1st value.
January 1st
But
value.
the point of
Okay.
this is they're gonna,
Thank you.
I don't ever wanna try to figure out for a client what supplemental taxes are gonna be. Figure out what their taxes are gonna be, and whatever they don't pay in regular taxes will be added to supplemental. That's the way to figure that out. So in other words, let's say for instance, at the very end of this new property that we were just talking about, let's go back in a couple of slides. Okay, they're gonna pay, their monthly tax is gonna be $825. If the previous monthly tax was 500, that means $325 is how much they're gonna have to, is the additional they're gonna have to pay on a supplemental tax. But just get them prepared to pay what their tax is gonna be, and let them know that your tax bill may not reflect the whole amount you're gonna have to pay. But don't worry, Uncle Sam will come running to you later.
That 325 is monthly, that's a monthly
If I were
rate, that's not
representing
annual.
the
For how
buyer
long?
in this
For a year?
scenario,
The
is it
monthly for a
getting
year.
too far in the
Times
weeds
12.
to look up
So
what
that
the seller
monthly,
is currently paying?
That's
Oh,
just
no.
for the month.
You can
And
look
the
at
year
that
is
and you
12
can
for the
say,
whole
you're gonna
year.
get a little tax bill right now. By the way, when you get the closing statement, you're gonna see. You're gonna see what their taxes were. Now, when you get a closing statement, the buyer may even have been credited money for taxes based upon when they closed in the year. Now, like for instance, right now, if the buyer had not paid their property taxes and closed right now for the second installment, they would actually get a credit for, right now, just 15 days. So on the closing statement, the seller would credit the buyer 15 days of property taxes. But guess what? They're gonna have to make that property tax payment by April 10th. And it's gonna be a little one, probably, because if it were in our scenario here. But they're gonna catch up later with supplemental. And here's the thing you need to tell them, is, you know, the supplemental taxes, you need to tell them that when your tax bill comes due, and it's their responsibility for getting a tax bill. And a lot of times the tax bills sold to the original owners are sent to that address. And, you know, if they forward their mail, sometimes it's forwarded. So, but it's their responsibility to make sure they pay taxes. That's why you have the sheet for them.
But there is a little caveat to that. If they're 55 or older.
We're gonna go into that right now.
Opposition
Yeah.
19.
So
They
it can be done.
transfer their
Tax
base.
basis.
Okay, so let's get into Prop 19.
When should they expect that bill?
They're,
Let's say you
they're,
close right
they're,
now.
they're not consistent. Do not tell them
It
when,
could be
because we don't
anytime.
know, nor does the county.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
they will get it.
sometimes it comes within a month of
Yeah.
closing, sometimes it's 3 months later.
So it's January is when they reassess, so they start sending them out, sometimes February, March, April, but it'll be in that period.
Yeah, okay.
Good job, Donna.
So,
You're
very good.
very good at that stuff.
Okay, so,
You're-
Ground.
so
Yeah.
supplemental taxes, let's go to Prop 19. Now, in 2021, we passed Prop 19, and what did Prop 19 replace?
Prop 60 and 30. 60,
Bingo,
70, yeah.
60 and 90. So if anyone ever brings up Prop 60 or 90, you tell them it is dead. There is no such thing anymore. But Prop 19 replaced it, and one part of this is very positive for most people. One part might be a little negative. So let's talk about the first part, the one that affects us the most, and that is that the first part allows a transfer of your current tax assessment to a new home if you meet one of the following criteria. Victim of wildfires, right? You wouldn't think about this much, but or handicap, okay, or the one we use most of the time, 55 plus. So let's say, for instance, that that May sold his home and wanted to buy the next home. Could he transfer his tax assessment?
No,
No.
because he's a baby.
He's a baby.
He's handicapped.
Now, could I transfer mine?
Yes.
You're still.
Yes.
Yes, I could.
Yes.
Now, I could go over the room, and some of you I'm not sure about, so I won't use your name. But not kidding. No, but so the point of this is that this is a really nice thing, very helpful. Remember when we've had these trainings in the past, we talked about the situation room, to where the situation is you need to figure out their situation. You're not there to give them a marketing plan and they're sell their house. You're there to be their everything, okay? And this is one of these everything things you need to know about. Because if they're selling and buying somewhere else in California, they can transfer their tax rate. By the way, this is only California, not anywhere else, just California. And there is no longer like Prop 60 and 90, only some counties that participate. It is a statewide thing. So let's say, for instance, you have an assessment of Steve's home. Your house was assessed at, let's say his current assessment is $300,000, okay? And he wants to sell that, and let's say he sells that home. Let me kind of give you some examples here. So let's say he sells this home at, point the camera at me if you want to. Let's see, he sells, okay,
Like
at
cautious, she
$1.5
knows how to do that stuff.
That's good.
Okay, at $1.5 million, okay? He sells at $1.5 million, that's sell, but now he wants to buy at $1.3 million. Okay, so what will his new assessment be on his new property? He's currently assessed at $300,000. What is his new assessment gonna be?
300,000.
$300,000. Okay, however, let's take this differently. Let's say he buys, he now wants to move up to $2 million.
Doubt it.
To $2 million he wants to buy at. What's his new assessment gonna be at?
800,000.
The 300 plus the difference.
That's 300 plus the difference. Nice job, guys. 800K. So now, let me tell you something that you need to look at. Let's say, for instance, Steve buys in Mission Viejo there, and he has almost no extra taxes on there and no Mello-Roos. But he wants to buy in Rancho Mission Viejo, and they have a Mello-Roos, okay, of $3,000. How does that work?
I do not know.
He has to pay
He's gonna
it.
get that.
He's gonna have to pay that. What you actually move over is not your tax bill, it's your assessment on your home, okay? That's what moves over. So don't tell them they're gonna move their tax bill over, because they could. What happens, they move from Rancho Mission Viejo back to Mission Viejo. Guess what? They lose this, because there is no Mello-Roos where Steve lives. So if they move from Rancho Mission Viejo back to Mission Viejo, it could be a bonus for them that way, okay? It seems like more often than not, it goes the other way though. So just remember that, yeah.
How
Mace,
did you get
put the camera back to here and I'll stay here.
How did you get 800 instead of 500 for the 1.5 and 2 different?
Because the 800 is the differential. So he's buying $500,000 differential. No, I'm sorry, the new taxes is 500, not 800.
No, it's right.
No, you're
you
right,
have to
it's
add
3
the
plus.
Home is 300.
It's 3 plus the 5.
It's
3
3 plus
plus
the 5 is
yeah.
8.
Correct.
Yeah,
You got
3
that
plus
right.
5 is 8.
So Kasha, the base, the $1.5 million, the assessed value on $1.5 million was based on 300,000 tax. That's what they bought their home, or around that price range when they first bought it. It's gone up, so the tax base is 3. The difference between 2 million and
So the 3 plus 5 is 800. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, Mace.
So I have an example that I'm currently working on, and they bought a house, or they're assessed at 300,000. They're looking to purchase a $500,000 property. Is there there's no real advantage to
Yeah, there is. Are they
property.
55?
Yeah,
There's a $200,000 advantage.
but I thought it's
No,
You
so
still got to
so
pay
they
the
moved their
difference.
300 over.
Yeah.
So what are they selling this property at?
probably four, just call it 400 for easy numbers.
Okay, so they're selling it at 400.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're buying it what?
500.
500. So they have a $100,000 advantage.
Yeah, but their tax base is 300, right?
Yeah.
So
So
it's
there's
a 200.
So because
No.
you just said the difference.
yeah, it's a
No.
difference. It would so if you just all you do is take the difference, it'd be 100,000
It'd be
difference.
100.
Okay.
So, and hey, if you guys want to run through these scenarios, you have clients, call me, text me. We'll put these together. What I need current assessment, current or new sales or old sales price or new sales price,
New
and
sales
buy
price?
new sales price, new buy price.
So in that example, would they be paying on 400,000 instead
Yes.
of the 500,000?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, they get $100,000, and so that would be in essence what they
Okay.
pay.
Yeah.
Now they do have to file with this, so this isn't automatically done for them. So you got to tell your people when you do that to make sure they file for that. They have 2 years to file for it, but you're only going to get it when they do file for it.
So, it
So
doesn't
if they
back-
miss a
doesn't
year,
backdate?
they're going to lose a meal, huh?
Okay. It doesn't backdate then.
It doesn't. No, it won't backdate
No.
if you're too late. You got to do it right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So remember, you got until January 1st to do it.
Yeah.
To catch that year.
Okay.
So,
Did
okay.
they file it with the city?
County.
The county.
Okay.
County
Yeah, have a
assessors.
year, but if you
It's like a
sell
one-page
and you
document.
don't buy right away, you
Something
only
they gotta
have
fill
2
out.
years.
You have 2 years. Yeah. So you have 2 years to do
Yeah,
that.
it's the
You
volume
have
So-
of
2 years
my
to
voice.
use
To
it.
use
My
that.
kids tell me that all
Yeah.
the
So
time.
2
Mason,
years
I
to
can
use
snack
it, and
Like,
here's the
lower
thing.
your voice, Mom. I can't.
You can also
Sound
use it
comes
3
out.
times. So it
I
used
know,
to be you
nice.
could use it once. Now it's 3 times. So it's really nice. Now let's talk about go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so a
Sarah?
little complicated question. Okay, so if a homeowner has 2 separate residences, okay?
But they only have one primary.
Yeah, okay, so and there's the law that within the last 5 years, correct me if I'm wrong, that if you live somewhere within 2 years, it can be called your primary residence,
Yeah,
correct?
if you've lived there.
Yeah,
24
okay.
of the last 60 months.
Yeah, okay,
Need not be consecutive.
okay. So if that's happened and then there's another property that they have owned, that they've lived there 2 years out of the last 5
They
years
can use
also?
one but not the other.
Okay, they pick which one?
Yep,
Okay.
one but not the other. They can pick which one they want.
Can you just say those terms again? You just said them.
They must live in it 24 of the last 60 months for it to meet the Prop 19 regulations. The months need not be consecutive.
Okay.
So let's say they moved out and all of a sudden they've only lived there 18 of the last 24 months. If they move back in for 6 more months, they now meet that. They don't have to establish 24 consecutive months. Need not be consecutive.
But in her example, they could sell the one home and take that, and why they keep the other home, and then maybe sell that one if they wanted to down the road, if they were there within the 24 to 60 months again as a primary residence, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you consolidate both those taxes?
You can
on the
sell
same
a primary
property?
residence. I've sold 2 over the
Mhm.
years, a primary residence, and taken what's known as the capital gains exemption.
Mhm.
Okay, you can do that every 2 years, in unlimited times. But you have to live there at least 2 years in order to qualify for it. Okay, here we go. Let's get back on what we're doing here. So,
Yeah, that was good though.
yeah.
Okay.
Now, let's talk about the second part of Prop 19, that's property tax transfers. And here's the one that some people don't like. I think it's fair, but some people don't like it. So let's say, for instance, I pass away and I've got my new property, or let's say, let's make it for me. I pass away, I don't want to kill anyone else here. I pass away and I have a pretty low tax base on my property, I've been there a long time, and now my kids get the property, okay? They get it in step-up value, so they have no tax on it, okay, that's cool. No immediate tax unless it increases in value after I die, but they want to keep it and rent it out. Well, what's going to happen now is they can do that, but they're going to be reassessed at whatever the new price, the new value is. And that's not a sales price because it hasn't sold. They're just going to try to assess what it is based upon the comps and hit you for it. So let's say, for instance, in Steve's case, if his property is worth, let's just say $1.5 million, and he bought it at $300,000, you can look at what the heirs are going to do. But if they move in, if any of the heirs move in and use it as their primary residence, then they get the parent, child, grandparent exclusion. It only happens to a parent, child, or grandparent. So it goes up and down 3 generations. Okay.
Wait a minute, so if my mom passes away, my daughter could live in it?
Yep.
I thought it was just the immediate family.
Nope, it goes up 3.
Okay, now let me ask you this, on that example.
Up or down 3, because it can actually go from, a child to a parent.
Okay, so, say you have a family, like, we wanna rent it out eventually,
Right.
but we don't wanna get reassessed. So if nobody moves into it, but we pretend like we lived there for 2 years, then we can rent it on the 3rd year?
Well, I mean, here's the thing, unless you're audited and they catch you, but I mean, if they get it,
Because they wouldn't know. I mean, we're not
Well-
renting it to anyone those 2 years, it could be just family living there.
yeah,
What's the time period?
Well,
After 2 years?
2
then?
years. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I
Just
wouldn't
saying, you
take-
could do the math.
I
Okay.
Do
wouldn't
the math.
take advantage.
Okay,
You're
yeah.
so tricky.
Another kind of complicated question. So what if the property
Well, they
has
wanna keep it,
EDUs
but
on
they
it? And
So they kept it
so
for 2 years.
the children
Sorry,
inherit the
Steve.
property and they're
I
living
just
in the
think it's
primary
kinda
residence and
smart.
there's 2 ADUs on it, then does that jack up the taxes?
All right,
Not
Trying
really.
to understand that.
Call the assessor on that.
Yeah.
Those are
I'm gonna keep
little
talking.
things I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't feel comfortable in.
Yeah.
I just
Insane.
am trying to.
Okay,
say
here we
out
go.
loud to remember.
Moving forward, Prop 19 affects receiving property. That's what you need to know. There's still questions about these things when you have specialty things and things like that. Then call the tax assessor on it. That's what I would say. So a couple things I want to talk about. A lot of times you have a buyer that says, "I don't want to buy and pay Mello-Roos." Okay, and I understand that nobody wants to pay more taxes, but what they need to know is that when you buy a property that has Mello-Roos on it, the value of that's been affected by the higher taxes. Because guess what value really comes down to? Value comes down to what the total monthly payments are going to be. Let's take 2 scenarios. Let's take a property that is $1 million, okay? Let's say $1.5 million. It has no Mello-Roos on it whatsoever. But you take another property at $1.3 million, and it has Mello-Roos on it. Roughly, their payments would come out to about the same if they took a mortgage on it, by the time you included the taxes and the mortgage itself.
Really?
But one sells for $200,000 more. So you might be able to buy a property in Mission Viejo, okay, let's say for $200,000 more than what you buy in Rancho Mission Viejo with the Mello-Roos. But don't exclude the Mello-Roos. Look at those properties, just look at it maybe a little lower price range if they have the Mello-Roos. Because, when you look at that, I can tell you, we've taken buyers out, and our sons, and I know other people have too, to Rancho Mission Viejo, and they look at all the new stuff out there and they go, I want this. And yet they look at that, but they don't want to pay Mello-Roos. But they get out there and they go, wow, this is so nice, this is new, this is what I want. I don't want an old Mission Viejo house. I'll pay the Mello-Roos. And we just have to move down a little bit in the value of the house we buy. And then guess what? Let's say you move in Santa Margarita. What happened in Santa Margarita about 10 years ago? they lost all of their Mello-Roos. They paid it off, it was done. So guess what happened to people that bought a few years before? A few years before, everybody was thinking Mello-Roos. They had an automatic inflation of their property because they had no longer Mello-Roos. And you looked at the comps, and I bet if you went back and did a compilation of all those comps, that about that time that changed, it increased quite a bit. Now maybe even a year or two before, knowing it wouldn't be forever, it might have also gone up a little bit too. So let's not look at Mello-Roos properties. You need to explain to them. Don't explain that you want to buy a Mello-Roos property. Explain that you want to consider it. Okay? And when it comes down to it, there is a way to make this an apples to apples comparison by figuring out your total payment on it. And maybe you have to buy something less in Rancho Mission Viejo than you'd buy in Mission Viejo, but the overall payment would be the same. Okay.
That's a good point.
One more thing I want to point out is there is a thing called a homeowner's exemption on your property taxes. What it allows you to do is if you live in the property as your primary residence, you can only do this for one home, you can deduct up to you deduct $7,000 of value on that assessment. Okay, so $7,000 is what your value would be. So if you have that, okay, and most people in here that own their homes have that, how much is that going to save you per year?
$70.
$70. It's just based on the basic levy, saves you $70. Your buyer should certainly file for that. They will get notified when they close a home. They will actually be notified by the county to file for this if they want to. So it's not something they have to be proactive about as far as looking out. They just have to be proactive in completing it when it's mailed to them.
And that's at what value can they get that from?
No, for any value you have, 7,000 is reduced.
7,000 is reduced.
It's a one-time, it's a once a year 7,000 reduction. So if your, value on your home is $1 million, then it's 999,000, it's 7,000 off, 993,000. So.
And would you recommend to your buyers also about if they are veteran exemption, disabled veteran exemption?
Yeah, there's some exemptions like that, and I don't know what those are exactly, but you can have them, check with the county assessor on that. So I don't know that we have, the only disabled that I know we have is Prop 50, is that they can transfer their tax base. I'm not sure they have a lower tax base for veterans.
Yeah, they do. I'm looking, there's an estimated calculator on the Orange
That
County
happened to me the other
website,
day.
and it's showing if you're a disabled veteran on a $1.18 million property, it's a $150,000 exemption.
Okay, yeah, that could be good.
So
That's gonna
Where
save
did
you
you
like
see
$1,500 a year.
on
So
the
it's
state
more.
tax collector website,
So $1,500 a
there's
year.
like calculators.
If you're, now what's military?
Regular veterans, let me pick, because you can actually pick these different
Okay.
scenarios and then hit.
Well, look at that as we go forward with something else.
4,000.
4,000. Okay, well, hey, 4,000 is, it's
So would it be in
$400.
addition to the 7,000?
Yeah, it's 4,000 off the value, so it'd be $40 a month, a year.
Plus the
$40 is $40, right?
But that's a year, not a month, correct?
No, that's a year, yeah. $40.
And
$40
the
a year.
$70 is a year.
Yeah, a year, the $40 would be a year. I know states like Texas, because Steve just looked into this, they actually have veterans exemptions and things like that that are really hefty. So, okay, here we go. Let's talk about something else now. I'm going to close my computer. Any questions on this?
Oh, that was awesome.
So
Thank
the
you.
homeowners exemption, I have a question on it. That has to be done within like the first year when
Just
they buy
done
the
before
house?
before January 1st, so it's tagged on their next tax bill. If they do it later, it's good, but it wouldn't be good for that tax year.
And it could be for any price point?
Any price point. 7,000 is $70 is how much they'll save a year. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to pass this out right here. Okay, and I want everyone to take their phones out. Okay. And here's my phone. Oh, my phone is recording. So I'm going to show you how to go to your Orange Coast Title app and figure out future property
You want
taxes
your phone?
on that. Yeah, hit that stop.
Oh, okay.
Nope, I want you to do yours. I'm going to do mine.